Before the United States existed, before any European had ever set foot on this land, there was already a world here. Hundreds of nations, thousands of languages, millions of people. And most of them are gone now. This is the story of what happened and why it still matters today. Most people picture pre-colonial North America as empty land, open forests, quiet rivers, waiting to be discovered. That picture is wrong. By 1491, the year before Columbus sailed, historians and archaeologists estimate between 10 and 18 million people lived across this continent. These weren't scattered wanderers. Many were organized, deeply rooted civilizations with their own governments, agriculture, trade networks, medicine, and law. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy operated under a democratic constitution, the Great Law of Peace, that united 6 nations under shared governance. Several historians note that when the American founding fathers were designing their own government, they studied this system directly. Near present-day St. Louis, the Mississippian city of Cahokia had a population archaeologists estimate at 10 to 20,000, larger than London at the same period. In the Southwest, the ancestral Puebloans built cliff dwellings still standing today, nearly 1,000 years later.
These societies ranged from small nomadic groups adapted to specific environments to large urban civilizations with sophisticated political systems. Linguistic records indicate there were anywhere from 800 to over 2,000 distinct tribal nations, with more language diversity than all of Europe combined. That world was real. It was here. And then, everything changed. Today, the U.S. federal government recognizes 574 Native American tribes, but historians estimate there were at least 800, possibly far more, distinct nations before European contact. A large number of those original nations no longer exist. Many tribes disappeared entirely as distinct peoples. Others were absorbed into larger groups, renamed by government agencies, or lost official recognition over generations. Either way, the result is the same. A people, a culture, a language erased.
Before contact, approximately 300 distinct language families existed across North America, as structurally different from each other as English is from Mandarin. Today, many are completely silent. Others survive only in old audio recordings. Of the roughly 150 native languages still spoken in the U.S., most have fewer than 10 fluent speakers, nearly all of them elderly. When the last speaker of a language dies, it's gone. The concepts it carried, the ways of seeing the world that existed only in those words, gone permanently.
3 specific stories make this real. The Beothuk people lived in Newfoundland for thousands of years. By the early 1800s, disease and displacement had reduced them to almost nothing. In 1829, a woman named Shaunadithit died. She was the last known Beothuk person alive. An entire civilization, its language, its knowledge, its stories, died with her. The Timucua of Florida once numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Within 2 centuries of European contact, they had ceased to exist as a people. Disease, English organized slave raids, and warfare had killed all of them. The Timucua language now exists only in old Spanish missionary documents. No living speaker has existed for over 300 years. In 1911, a man walked out of the California wilderness near Oroville, starving, alone, speaking no language anyone recognized. His name was Ishi. He was the last surviving member of the Yahi people, who had been systematically killed by settlers in the 1800s. For years, he had hidden in the mountains, watching everyone he knew die one by one. He eventually lived at a university museum, teaching researchers his language and traditional skills. In 1916, he died of tuberculosis. The Yahi language died with him. These are not edge cases. Historical records document dozens of similar endings across the continent.
4 forces drove the disappearance of hundreds of native nations. Each worked differently. Together, they created something nearly impossible to survive. Disease, the first and fastest force. Most of the catastrophic outbreaks that followed European contact were unintentional. Explorers and settlers carried smallpox, measles, influenza, and typhus, pathogens to which native populations had zero immunity. The results were staggering. Historians estimate some regional native populations declined by 50 to 90% in the century following initial contact. Smallpox spread faster than European settlers themselves, moving along existing trade routes, killing thousands of people who had never seen a European face. Entire villages were found empty by explorers arriving years after the outbreak had already passed. This was one of the largest demographic collapses in recorded human history. It reshaped the continent before formal colonization had even fully begun, which is partly why early European accounts described North America as empty. They were arriving after the devastation.
Conflict, the second force. As settlement expanded, it met resistance, sustained, organized, and often militarily sophisticated resistance. But over time, power imbalances grew. The outcomes were not equal. The Sand Creek Massacre in 1864 killed an estimated 150 to 200 Cheyenne and Arapaho people, mostly women, children, and elderly, in a surprise military attack on a peaceful encampment. The Wounded Knee Massacre in 1890 killed somewhere between 200 and 300 Lakota Sioux.
But the deaths along the trail were only part of the damage. Removal severed communities from the land. Their entire way of life was built around. From sacred sites, food sources, medicine plants, and the physical geography embedded in their oral traditions. Nations that survived the march often still collapsed culturally because everything that gave their world structure had been left behind. Cultural erasure, the fourth force, and the most deliberate one. Starting in the 1870s, the US and Canadian governments built a system of residential boarding schools for Native children, with a single stated goal: assimilation. The philosophy was summarized directly by Richard Henry Pratt, who founded the first U.S. Indian boarding school in 1879. His stated mission was to kill the Indian in order to save the man. Children as young as 4 or 5 were removed from their families, often by force, and sent to schools hundreds of miles away. Their hair was cut, their clothing taken. They were given European names. Speaking their language or practicing their traditions was punishable by physical discipline.
What disappeared? When a nation disappears, the loss goes far beyond the human count. Indigenous communities had developed over thousands of years, detailed knowledge systems tied to specific environments. Traditional ecological knowledge, accumulated observation of local ecosystems, seasonal patterns, and land behavior, is now being actively studied by modern ecologists because in multiple documented cases, native land management produced results that Western science is only beginning to replicate. Plant-based medicine systems identified compounds that pharmaceutical researchers continue to investigate. Several medications in current clinical use trace their origins to plants first identified by indigenous healers. And the languages, 300 of them, most now gone, were not just communication tools. Linguistic research consistently shows that language structures how people think. Different languages encode different relationships between concepts, different ways of organizing memory and attention. When a language disappears, those frameworks disappear permanently, not just for that community, for everyone. That is a documented, measurable,
irreversible loss.
Here is the part of the story most people never hear. Despite everything in this video, disease, warfare, forced removal, a century of institutional erasure, Native Americans did not disappear. Today, approximately 9 million people in the United States identify as Native American or Alaska Native. The Navajo Nation spans 27,000 square miles across 3 states. The Cherokee Nation has over 400,000 registered citizens, larger in population than many U.S. states. The survival of indigenous nations through 5 centuries of sustained pressure was not passive. It required active choices, hiding sacred objects from government agents, passing language to children in private, maintaining ceremonies in secret for decades when practicing them was officially forbidden. Archaeologists and historians now regularly confirm that indigenous oral traditions, long dismissed as mythology by Western academic institutions, turn out to be accurate historical accounts. Stories of floods, volcanic events, and ecological changes preserved for thousands of years have been verified by geological and archaeological evidence. The knowledge survived because people refused to let it die.
Why this matters? There's a useful thought experiment here. If a major historical monument were destroyed today, the world would know within hours. Institutions would respond. It would enter the record permanently as a loss to human civilization. Over the past 5 centuries, something considerably larger than any monument was lost. Hundreds of civilizations, each representing thousands of years of accumulated human knowledge, language, and culture, disappeared. Many of them are absent from standard history curricula. Most Americans could not name 5 tribes. That absence is not accidental. Historical records show that the same governments responsible for tribal destruction also controlled how that history was written and taught. What appeared in textbooks was a choice. What was left out was also a choice.
More than 500 nations, many of them gone. Their languages, knowledge systems, governance traditions, and ways of understanding the world, most of it lost. Not through natural decline, through documented, systematic, policy-driven erasure that continued well into the 20th century. And yet, the people who were supposed to disappear did not. They are still here, rebuilding, teaching their children, reclaiming languages, telling their own stories. In a world that moves fast and forgets easily, that kind of persistence is worth understanding. If this video reached you, share it. These are stories that deserve to be heard.